Okay,
Thank you.
we are on Vav Amud Aleph. We're on 6a. But actually, I think it would be wise for us to backtrack a little bit to the bottom of Hey and the base, the bottom of 5b, because we're basically in the middle of a very long question. Previously, in our Gemara shir, we learned that the shiurim for chetzitzin and mechitzin halacha Moshe misinai, which basically were examples, but we're saying in general that the different shiurim in the Torah, the different thresholds and measurements for, whether we'll see examples, whether it be about Tuma and Tahara, whether it be about, Shabbos, Yom Kippur, Kashrus, different related things. All of these shiurim are not actually stated in the Torah, but it's just a tradition that Moshe received orally and passed down at Har Sinai. So that was the assertion made about seven lines up from the bottom of Hayam and Beis. Well, just for the sake of having clarity, I will read the question from the beginning, and then we'll go through the entire thing right now, okay? So the question is going to be, Shiurin Doraisa Ninhu? Shiur Doraisa Ninhu. So what do you mean? The Shiurin are actually from the Torah. We have actually a scriptural basis for the different Shiurim in the Torah. The Siv. Eretz Chitos Ora Gevnus Eina Rimon Eretz Zayis Shemen Udvash. So these are the Sheva Minim. These are the 7 species. Now, the 7 species aren't just special because they are indigenous to the land of Eretz Yisrael, but actually there's a deeper significance behind them because each one of them is hinting to a different shear for different areas of halacha. And so basically the question is, why are you saying that shiurim are halacha Moshe misinai when we have a scriptural basis? And now what the Gemara is going to do for the next, going halfway through Vav Amud Aleph is just basically breaking it down and telling us all the different shiurim that we derive from this pasuk. But that's the question. The question is, we have a pasuk. And now, right, we understand the question? Okay, and now we're just going to go through and break it down. So here we go. Number 1, what we did last time. So, okay, so... sorry. Amar Achana, Kol Pasuk is said l'shiur nemar chita lebayis hamanuga. So bayis hamanuga is not just humans get afflicted with saras, but theoretically their houses could also be afflicted with saras. The Tanan hanichnas lebayis hamanuga ukelev akseifa v'sama v'tabosa b'yado hu v'heitz me'miyad. If you go into a bayis hamanuga, a house afflicted with saras, and you're holding your sandals, you're holding your ring, you're not wearing them on your person, so that immediately upon entering a bayis hamanuga, both you and your items become tamei immediately. Haya lavish kelev v'sanav rag v'tavosav v'tzvosav hu tamei v'hein tohorim ad sheyishev b'chdei achilas pras. However, if you were wearing the clothing on your body, so then you become tamei immediately, but your clothing only becomes tamei if you were there for the shir kidei achilas pras. Just to briefly reiterate, what's the shir kidei achilas pras? So back in the day, they would make one loaf for every day. That would be their meal. And they had 2 meals a day, so they split that loaf into a pras, into half. And they would have one half of the loaf in the morning, the other half in the later on, in the late afternoon, sometime then. So for that means that a meal is half a loaf of bread. I mean, we're about to say that they have condiments with it that they ate as well, which makes sense, right? When you have Israeli style meal or Mediterranean style or Indian style, like that region, they're really into making different kinds of breads and having salatim, having dips for them. So those were the kind of meals that they ate. So what is the shir kidei achilas pras? The amount of time it takes to eat a loaf, half a loaf of bread. And we're talking about pas chitiv lo pas seorin. This is specifically wheat, not made of the other chameshus minei dagan, not made from one of the other 4, right? When we order our matzahs, you can get the barley, you can get the spelt. We have different kinds. That's because there's 5 different grains that are all fair game that you can make hamotzi on. But here it's specifically the shear that it takes to eat half a loaf of bread made out of wheat, not out of barley, which goes quicker. A barley-based one would be heavier. Mesa v'ochel belifton, and that you are reclining, like on Pesach night. You're reclining and you're just eating it together with a condiment, and that's what your focus is. So basically, remember I told you how like every rabbi and his grandmother has an opinion on precisely what the Shir Kedei Achias Pras is. But if I recall correctly, let me give you just the two extremes. So on one extreme, the Chassam Sofer says it's 9 minutes it takes to eat half a loaf of bread, and the Marchesha says that it is 3 minutes. And then if you look in between, there's the Aruch LaNer weighs in, the Aruch HaShulchan weighs in, the Tzemach Tzedek weighs in, Rabbi Yisrael Chanan Spector weighs in, the Kaf HaChaim weighs in, and they all have like different opinions along this. It's kind of like in a lot of discussions of shiurim. Think about when we talk about the shiur for bishul on or Shabbos or Kashrus. So it has to be something has to be yad soletisbo. When something's hot enough that your hand's going to recoil from it because of the heat, you can't touch it. So that's the shiur for something considered being cooked, whether for purposes of violating bishul and Shabbos, whether it be for purposes of kashrus as well, of two things being cooked together. So again, you have a whole entire spectrum, which I think ranges roughly between 110 to 180 degrees, though I'm sure there's outliers beyond that. So, and then there's many opinions that, kind of, you have your bell curve of opinions on the matter. Okay. So that was number one. Okay, now Se'ora Ditnan, Etzem Kise'ora. Mitame b'maga b'masa, ve'eno mitame b'ohel. So when we get to barley, we said that etzem kise'ora, when you have a bone that's the size of a barley, so that a bone from a human body. So we're talking about the issue of tumas mace, of being tame through defilement of the dead. So that since it's not a significant part of the body, it only renders you tame if you touch it or if you lift it. But if it's inside, if it's under the same roof as you, that would not be significant enough to render you tame. However,
are you talking about a grain of barley?
No, we're talking about a bone the size.
The size of a grain of barley?
It would seem so. You're saying that's a very small size, right?
Yes. Unless it's a part of the bread, the wheat, the loaf.
It seems to be Garan Saora.
Because it talks about barley bread beforehand.
No, that's what it would seem. Seems to be
half a loaf of bread. It talks about bread before.
Yeah, I know, but that's not over here though. It's not talking about the loaf though.
Weird. Okay.
Yep, that's what it is. Okay. Now Geffen. What is Geffen? Kidei revius yain lenazir. So in terms of so basically for a nazir, not only can a nazir not drink wine, but he's not able to have the peels of the grapes and have all these different kinds of sediments that are associated with the grape, or parts of the grape. So how do you measure it? The way you measure it is you basically do displacement. You pour a revius of wine into a cup, and then you put these things into the cup. And once it displaces a revius worth of wine from that cup, that's how you know that's the shear. That's how you measure it. So what the Gemara is telling us is that it's not enough to measure by displacing a revius of water, but you have to displace a revius of wine, because as Rashi points out, and I'm sure we're all aware, because when it comes to wine, since wine is thicker than water, therefore it will take more to remove a revius of wine than it would take to remove a revius of water. Very good. So that's what Geffen tells us. Te'ena, so figs. Krigo geris lotzas Shabbos. So if you recall, we spent a lot of time in Masechet Shabbos for the Mishnah folks talking about how much you have to carry of X thing in order to violate carrying it on Shabbos. Right? If I have a speck of bacteria on my finger, I'm not over the violation of Hotzah of carrying because it's on my finger, right? What's the threshold? So the threshold is the size of dried figs. Rimon, pomegranates. So as we know, a vessel is generally susceptible to becoming tameh. But at what point is something no longer a kli? So if the hole in the kli is big enough that a pomegranate can fit through it, then basically it's not functional anymore. That means it doesn't functionally hold things. If it can't hold something even the size of a pomegranate. So that would mean it's no longer susceptible to tuma because it's just simply no longer a kli because it doesn't hold anything in it. Then next one, Eretz Zay Shemen, not Dvash yet. So Eretz Shekol Shiureh Kizesim is telling us a land that all of its shiurim are kizesim. Gemara interjects, wait a minute, Kol Shiureh Sagadaitach, Ha'ikahani Darminan. So the Gemara says, what do you mean? What do you mean all the shiurim in the Torah are based on the size of an olive, of a kizayis? Didn't we just give a number of examples of shiurim that are not a kizayis? So what's saying is, by default, we measure a kizayis as a standard measurement we use. But yes, there are exceptions to that rule, as we are seeing. Devash, so, right, what kind of, when we talk about honey, milk and honey in the Torah, what kind of honey are we referring to? Sorry, what?
Date honey.
Very good. Referring to date honey. Not to the, as much as we love honey from the bee, that's not the one that's referring to. So, kichoseves hagasa. So, like we're talking about a big date, biyom hakipurim. So that's very important to know because when we rabbis get questions about people who need to eat on Yom Kippur, sometimes depending on the circumstance, we try to, if someone needs to eat, we try to do what we call in shiurim. We try to mitigate it. So even though in theory, whenever someone, now, if someone needs to eat, then they're supposed to eat on Yom Kippur. I want to make sure it's very clear. But meaning, if you eat less than the shear on Yom Kippur, so let's say I'm Moshe Kurtz, God willing, I hope, I'm able to fast this coming Yom Kippur, right? So if I were to just say, yeah, I'm feeling pretty hungry, I could go for some kiddush right now. So if I eat like a lot of food, I will violate Yom Kippur and I will incur kares. But if I only eat less than this year while I still violate Yom Kippur, I'm not going to get the associated higher level metaphysical penalties that come along with it. So that's why when people need to eat on Yom Kippur, assuming it's medically viable, we advise them to have less than a shear each time. And so that's why also, we'll have people beforehand, they'll drink less than a mali lugma, less than a cheekful. They'll measure their, they'll put in liquid in their cheek before Yom Kippur, they'll spin it into a cup, they'll mark it off, and then they know that every, ideally 9 minutes, but you could be more makel if you need to, that's when you have another shear. So, yeah, Toby.
So in terms of the penalties, though, if you take less than a shear, just because you felt like it, isn't there still a penalty?
So it would be a general lav, but it wouldn't rise to the level that you would get kares for it.
But if it was truly medically necessary,
then you
there's no punishment at all.
So this gets to a sugya that we've touched on, right? What Toby's asking is, well, if you need it, then why are we trying to mitigate the circumstances? So this goes into the whole sugya of akal kal tchila. Basically, the question is, and we haven't had a shir about this in a while, but you might remember the terms hutra and dechuya. Basically, think about when I have to break Shabbos to save somebody. Is it that I'm breaking Shabbos, but saving someone's life supersedes Shabbos? Or is it not, I'm not violating Shabbos when someone's life needs to be saved? That's not called a violation of Shabbos. Arguably, it's even a kiyum of Shabbos. So when I have to eat on Yom Kippur because of Pikuach Nefesh, is it a hutra, like heter, completely permissible? It's like Yom Kippur doesn't exist for this person right now, or is it Dechuya? Yom Kippur still exists. There still is an Isser for this person to eat, but it's an Isser that's superseded by the need to preserve his own life. So if the Isser still exists, then then we should try to mitigate it as much as we can, as long as it doesn't compromise the person's medical condition. Right?
Right, but if the person takes the minimum,
Yeah.
then is he subject to punishment at all, or it's
No.
Oh.
We just try to mitigate things, but yeah,
of course, right.
no punishment, no worries on that one. Yeah, I want to make that very clear. Okay, very good. So anyway, that just to note that the shear. So now, why is the shear in general when it comes to food, like Pesach night we just had, you're supposed to have a kizayis, kizayis or 2 kizayisim. So why is it when it comes to Yom Kippur, it's not a kizayis, but it's grogeris, which is a larger amount? So the reason Rashi records from us, this is probably in Yoma, I would imagine. Yep, Yoma Pei Amid Beis. Because the loksiv be'achila el ashir. So this is supposed to be inoy. You're supposed to suffer on Yom Kippur. So what would counteract suffering? A kizayis, if you eat a little olive amount of something, that's not going to satiate your hunger. But if you have the amount of a date, that's big enough that it could already begin to satiate some of your hunger, and that's why it's a different shear for Yom Kippur. Okay. Because as v'nisam es nafsho seichem, you're supposed to suffer in Yom Kippur, so this negates your suffering. Okay, next. Okay, so those are all the different examples. Point being is alma d'oraisa ninhu, the tizbar shirim miksivi. So you're asking me, where is there a scriptural basis in the Torah for shirim? I just broke it down for you. This neat pasuk over here is the go-to source in the Torah for all the various different kinds of shirim that we need to know. So what's the answer? A very, very important concept. Rather, it's still a tradition that we received. So what are you going to do with the pasuk? Well, the pasuk is what we call an esmachta. So what's an esmachta? An esmachta can mean generally means one of two things, the Rambam tells us. It either means, one way to understand it, is that the rabbis came up with something, they made up the shiurim, and just as a neat way to remember, right? Because everyone's always doing Shnai Mikra, everyone's always reading the Torah, right? Of course, we all know Sukkah Torah by heart. So if the rabbis kind of said, by the way, if you want to remember the shiurim, here's a neat way to remember it, and they kind of hung their hat on that pasuk. The other way to understand, as a remez, as like a memory tool. The other way to understand esmachta is that actually it's not a commandment by God, but God is kind of deliberately creating a framework, and he's giving reshus, he's giving permission to the Rabban and saying, I'm giving you some resources to help you out while you're forming these parameters, and you have a right to make use of the pasuk for these purposes. So those are the two explanations, Toby.
So is there like a one-word definition for the term esmachta? Because what's coming to my mind is something like superimposition. Is that like that you're superimposing the verse?
Superimposition, that's like a quantum physics term, no?
Not exactly. But that you're, in other words, that you've got the oral law, and then you're taking the verse and putting it on the oral law to sort of give it cover, to give it.
So that's the question. What's the starting point? Is your point of departure that the rabbis came up with the shiurim and then they went into the Torah and they found a place to hang their hat on it? Or is it that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when he wrote the Torah, he deliberately created this possible framework, and he's basically giving reshus to the rabbis to make use of it, and which would mean that there's some more divine intent involved as opposed to just the Rabbanan formulating it on their own. So, and I guess I aim the whole Bzak discussion on that stuff, right? Okay. But esmachta is a very important, not to be confused with another concept of esmachta lokanya, which esmachta that comes up where it talks about gambling. So there's the smachta term gets used there, but it doesn't mean it's from the same word, but it has different implications. Okay, here we go. That was the end of that section. Any other remaining questions?
Yeah, Rabbi, I
Yes,
don't know. I guess I missed something or I forgot. What does this all have to do with the sukkah?
It's always the question whenever the Gemara goes on a tangent.
The height,
I'm
the
But yeah,
measurement.
sorry.
but exactly what Toby said. We were talking about what's the shear for a sukkah, where we get the shear for a sukkah from, and once we talked about the measurements for a sukkah, we said, well, where do we get the other measurements in the Torah from? So that's kind of
Oh, it's okay. It's in, yeah, okay.
yeah, very good.
Full
But
explanation.
always good to remind
Thank
ourselves
you.
how we wound up here. Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's good. That's good. We should keep that in mind. Okay. Now, here's the thing, Rabosai. You want to tell me that all these shiurim are just an esmachta and they're not actually d'oraisa, ordained by the Torah? But one of the primary examples we actually gave were chatzitzin. So you might be familiar with the laws of chatzitzin. In particular, women tend to be more attuned to this because it's relevant to the laws of nida. That's why women have to do what's called chafifa and iyun, and they go through this whole arduous process of either the bathing or the showering, depending on what you do, and then making sure that your nails and your hair and everything, all these different details before going to mikvah is to prevent having anything interposing between you and between the water. So chatzitzin, it's not just a law, by the way, for women going to mikvah. It's a law for anything that needs to go to mikvah.
Well, as a matter of fact, Rabbi, I was noticing in the Parsha this past week that the section that talks about immersing after impurity and whatever, after childbirth, only referred to the man immersing. It never said the word a woman immersing. It only talked about the woman bringing a sacrifice. It never said the woman had to immerse.
Right. Interesting. You're talking about like with Zav and Zava?
No, I'm talking about the section that where it went from that into talking about after childbirth.
Okay. Well,
and it was, and whether with not childbirth. I'm sorry. Yeah. If a woman had her period, and if the man sat on her bed or whatever, then he had to immerse. But it never said she did.
Right. So I mean, well, there's other sections where we talk about a safrala, and but basically that's the funny thing. Nowadays, especially not living in the Hasidic community, we associate mikvah with women. But the thing is, back in the days, not to detract from that, of course, but back in the days when the basic mikvah was standing, men also needed to worry about tumah and tahara. You could have a man who was a zav, the same way you have a woman who's a zava. So like nowadays, it's really fallen exclusively to the domain of women, but actually, as you rightly point out, Toby, in the Torah's vision, men also had to be going to mikvah.
Not even also. Show me the verse that says a woman had to immerse at all.
I'll have to open up the permission sign for you, but yeah. Okay, we'll find you the makor.
Thanks.
Alas, I'm not one of those people who can make it to the Chidon Tanakh. I don't know all the psukim. By the way, you saw there's a young girl who won the Chidon Tanakh today. So
from bicultural?
Oh, I think she was from Eretz Yisrael. But
there were four people from bicultural who are made the competition.
Nachas, that's wonderful. Right. Wow, look at that. All right, so here's the question: Chatzis d'oraisa in Dichsiv. It says explicitly you should bathe your skin in the water. That's pretty straightforward. So what do you mean it's only in a smachta, that it's hinted to in the Torah? I have an explicit verse telling me that you have to go ahead and wash yourself in the water, in the mikvah, that nothing should be interposing between you and between the water and your basar. So, Kiasi Hilchasa Lisaro. Maybe the halachic tradition, the oral tradition of this, is not regarding one's flesh, but it's coming to teach me the laws pertaining to one's hair, not having chatzitzos as well. So if I have one hair that's tied up, that's a problem because then the water's not going to get in. If I have 3 that are tied together, presumably it's loose enough that water could get in. And if I have 2 tied together, I'm not sure if it's too tight that water won't get in between the 2 hairs. So that's what the tradition is for. However, the Gemara shoots back, Sar Nami Doraisa. What do you mean? We learn from the Torah also that your hair must be touching the water. S, we see this many times, that the word S, I forget if it was it in a shear together here? Oh no, it was last night with the young men's club where we were talking about honoring one's grandparents and other in-laws and stuff. So many times the word S, we're like, what is the word alf suf? What is the word S in Hebrew coming to tell me? So many times understanding is as that the S in the Torah come to include what do you call it? Not tangential, that's the wrong word. Corollary, the corollary rules. So as a corollary to your skin having to touch the water, your hair also has to touch the water. Hatafel lebasaro. That comes to teach me things that are tafel to my basar also need to come in contact. Umaynihu, what's considered tafel to my skin? Sa'aro, my hair. So again, it seems that we have a scriptural basis for even your hair not being separated from the water. So if so, then what then do I need an oral tradition for that the Torah is not already telling me? So this is what it's coming to tell me. Ki asi hilchos al Rabbi Yitzchak, Rabbi Yitzchak. Turning to the next Talmud. Zvar Torah rubu umakil of chotzetz, usheina makil of eno chotzetz. On a d'oraisa level, it would only be an issue if the majority of the hair was covered or tied together, and it's also something that I'm makbid on. Footnote, there's a discussion about whether it means me as an individual who's makbid on it, who's particular about making sure I'm clean, or whether it's about, society. And what do we mean by society? Maybe it means just like my general neighborhood area. But anyway, you need 2 strikes. 1, the majority is covered, and B, that there's a hakpada, like, if there's something like mud that's on you, that's something that you would want to remove. We'll get back to, we'll do more Ian on that when we finish the Gemara. So, however, that's the d'oraisa level. Came along the Rabbanan, Ugazru al rubo she'eno makbid, mishum rubo hamakbid, v'amiyuto hamakbid, mishum rubo hamakbid. And basically what they did was they said, as long as you have one of the 2 strikes, that's already going to be an issue on a Rabbanan level. If either the majority of the hair has something on it, or it's tied up, or even if it's not the majority, but it's enough that you be makbid on it, that would be enough to jeopardize, that would constitute a chatzitza. Well, then the Gemara says, wait a minute, once we're in the business of making fences around the Torah, making life splendid for all of us, once you're doing that, why not just say anything's an issue? If you have, anything should be an issue, whether it's a miyad or a mak, whatever it is, either way, it should be a problem. So the answer is another very important halachic principle. Higufa gezerah v'anan nekum v'nigzar gezer legezerah. We generally don't like to do gezerah legezerahs. We don't like to do one gezerah on top of another gezerah. We already made a gezerah that if it has either one or the other, it's going to be a problem. We're not going to make a second gezerah that if it's neither of them, it will still be a problem. So, but basically, what do I need? So what do I need the rabbinic tradition to teach me? We could say, had it only been for what the Torah told me, I would have thought that any little bit would constitute, any bit of coverage of my hair would constitute a chatzitza. Comes along the rabbinic tradition to teach me, that only when it's rubo umakbid alav, when the majority is being covered, and you're makbid, only then is it going to be an issue of chatzitza. And then the rabbis came along and kind of circumscribed it. So that's basically what's going on. Let me pause. If there are any questions or anything, I could just clarify on that, because we're going to build on this a little bit. that's the end of the Gemara section for tonight. But any questions? All right. Maybe I didn't do a good job explaining it, or yeah. Good. Oh, okay, just making sure. Okay, so a few interesting points. Tosfos. Take a look at Tosfos right here. First Tosfos on the Amud. Dvar Torah Ruba Maglav Chotzeitz. So this whole entire idea.
How about which Amud?
Vav Amud Beis, the one we're currently.
Days 1. Okay.
Yeah, the one we just flipped in.
Okay.
So Tosfos says Yesh Mefarshim Tahachi Iri B'Seyar Aval B'Basar Chotzeitz Afilu Miyuto Shino Makbid. This whole discussion that you could get away with a little bit of something blocking between you and the water only pertains to your hair. But if there was anything blocking your skin, interposing between your skin and the water, that would already be an issue, regardless of whether you're makbid on it or whether it's only a little bit or not. This whole entire discussion, Tosa says, according to some, only pertains to Seyar, not to one's flesh. To which Tosa says that can't be true. Why? So one raya Tosos brings is that we know in a case in Yevamos, a nachris mu'berish in skyra b'na ein sarach tvila, that when a woman is converting, her fetus doesn't require a separate tvila, a separate immersion. And we basically figure out in the Gemara there's only potentially issues when something is considered fully covered. That's brought up, but basically that's one proof over there. The other proof is if you go further in Tosos basically quotes the Gemara. He quotes in Meseches Megvos, the Mishnayos there, as well as the Gemara in Shabbos. Just all these different miscellaneous kinds of shiurim. If someone's slaughtering, if someone gets something on their hands or on their clothing, all these different permutations, which basically suggest that if you have a little bit of schmutz on your skin, it's not going to be the end of everything. So if you just take a look at the last 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth to last line in Tosfos, Vim Tomar. Kevin Dasa Hilchasa Lerubo Lolamiuto Imkain Kra Lamayasa Darshina Basaro Shlehi Davar Chodis Beino Lebain Hamayim. So what then, now that we have this whole rabbinic teaching, okay? Once we have the rabbinic teaching, it's like important point. Once we have a rabbinic tradition about all these rules about rubo and makbid alav, that it has to be the majority of your body, and it has to be something that you're makbid on for it to be a problem. So why then do I need the do, right? Like, why do I need the pasuk then? What is the pasuk adding that the rabbinic tradition doesn't already teach me? So Tosa says, "V'shlomar to itzrich lebeis hasasarim." It's to include beis hasasarim. What's beis hasasarim? So like someone's armpits, basically parts of the body, or inside. This is a very important idea. The reason women will brush their teeth before going to mikvah, you're going to ask the question, wait a minute, what if I just, does the water need to go inside my mouth when I go in the mikvah? Do I have to swallow all the mikvah water into my body? No. But the idea is that it's called a roy libila, that it should be ro'oy, that if the water were to go in your mouth, there be nothing chotzetz between you and the water. It's not the water needs to go in, but it needs to be ro'oy for it to go in. So Tosa says this is how we learn the basis that the Beis HaSasarim also can't have a chatzitza. Okay, so that's Tosvos. One interesting machlokis, I believe, between the Rambam and Gaonim to note is when we are measuring a chatzitza on someone's body, do we look at the flesh and the hair as two separate units, or do we count it all together? So do we count all the hair and all the flesh together when counting what is considered the majority of covered, or we look at it as two separate things? So that's a machlokes between I think the Rambam and the Gaonim. And now I'll conclude with one final question. So I got a kick out of this. Before I tell you the question, I'll tell you how it's attributed in two different svarim. So I have two different achronim with me. I have the Minchas Shlomo, which is where Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, and I have the Birchas Avraham, whom we've used many times. So they both ask the same question, but in the Birchas Avraham, he attributes the following question to Reb Chaim Brisker, and in the Minchas Shlomo, it says Makshim Ha'olam, that the world asks the following question. So I was trying to figure out, why does one rabbi say it's Reb Chaim's question and the other one says it's the world's question? So it occurred to me that, Reb Chaim, who's like the godfather of Lumdus, if something is bothering Reb Chaim, it should be bothering all of Klal Yisrael. So that's the pshat. I say like somewhat like, ironically, but if I were like some like yeshivish Mesivta Rebbe, like that'd be like my big push shot on the class over there. Like Rabbi Sayev, it's bothering Reb Chaim, it should be bothering all of us. So okay, there you have it. So what is the question, right? What is the question of Reb Chaim or of the Welt that the entire world asks? So okay, hold on for this one. Makshim ha'olam. My taima rubo sheno makadalav midrabanan. Remember, we said that on a doraisa level, if you only have one strike, let's say the majority of your flesh or hair, your body is covered, but you're not makbid on it. You don't mind. I don't know. You don't mind the grime. You don't mind whatever the stuff is on your body. It's not bothering you. So then, it's only a chatzitza on a durabanan level. Because even though you're not makbid, it's still covering the majority of your body. So that's still an issue. So the question is, but since you're going to be makbid, that you want to be yotze, your tefillah midrabanan, so you're going to make sure to remove, make sure that you don't have a majority of it on your body. In Cain, so what happens is that essentially now you are being makbid on that stuff that's on your body because you want to be yotze your tefillah on a derabanan level. So actually, because the rabbis are telling you that if a majority of this particular substance on your body, it's going to invalidate your immersion, so then technically now you're makbid on it because you want to fulfill a tefillah on a derabanan level. So you're going to want to remove it. So, and if you are makbid on it, so then you have rubo and makbid alav. And now it should be a doraisa again. That's the question. You hear that one? Should I say? Yeah, I see you nodding. The rabbis are telling you to be makbid on it. So now that you're makbid on it, now that's robe and it's makbid, it's doraisa because you have both strikes against you. So when is it derabanan then? The Yeshuas Yaakov says in hachinami, in that case, it would actually be doraisa. But one answer that's provided, which I think, maybe some of us, it might be already occurring to us, is that what do I mean by makbid? Makbid means this thing is like grimy, it's disgusting, I want to take a shower. It doesn't mean that the rabbis say it's problematic and therefore I'm makbid. Like me, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not makbid on it. It's the rabbis who are makbid on it. I'm not being makbid on it. So that's not called a real hakpada then. That might be an answer. But let me just leave off with one final interesting tidbit from the Birchas Avraham. The Birchas Avraham wants to sink our teeth into what is the idea of being makbid, right? Why should it matter? Where do you see this in halacha? If I'm makbid on something, that will change whether does halacha care about my feelings, whether I'm makbid on something or not? I don't know if I'm makbid that I don't like to daven at shul with a minyan. Does that also mean I don't have to daven at shul with a minyan? Like where else in halacha does me being makbid on something actually matter? Why should that matter over here? So the Birchas Avram gives two suggestions as to what do we mean by hakpada. One is that it's omed lahasir bein kvuasham. What it means is, because it's not that I'm makbid on it and therefore it's problematic. It's that the question we're trying to figure out is this thing that I'm wearing considered batel to my body? If it's something that I'm going to remove in the near future, then it's not that there's an issue of being makbid on it. It's that being makbid on it indicates that it's not really batal to my body because I have plans to remove it later. That's one possibility. The other possibility is that because I'm makbid on it, that makes it a davar achashuv bifnei atzmo. It shows that I don't want this thing to be batal to my body because I myself am machshav this to be something separate from me. My hakpada indicates that this is a separate entity altogether. Now you're asking, what's the difference between the two of those? And I will give you an example. As we may or may not be aware, when women are instructed on how to prepare for going to mikvah, they're told to clip their nails. This is not just important because there might be dirt under their nails, but the question is, if you have nails that you are going to shorten soon and you're going to clip some of it, since it's omeid lahasir, it's going to come off at some point soon. Maybe those nails are not considered batal to your body because you plan on clipping them off at some point soon. And I guess I don't know these details so well. Let the women figure it out for themselves. I imagine there's different habits on when people clip their nails and all that. I'm not a bucky in this area. I can only tell you what the halacha says on it. But if a woman tends to, shorten her nails, since she's planning on doing that presumably sometime in the near future, that could possibly be considered a hakpada. That could jeopardize, it could be considered a chatzitza. However, if we say that the whole idea of hakpada is determining whether something's considered batal to your body or not, well, your nails are part of your body so long as you don't remove them from your body. And by the way, this whole sugya has implications. One of the big questions that comes up with going to mikvah is I have a dental implant. So there's different kinds. If you had a cavity filled, for instance, well, that's now for all intents and purposes part of your tooth. You don't have to worry. The same goes for a crown as well. The bigger issue is, what about something that, I don't know, I just put on for like, a week or two, and then I go back to the dentist. That could be an issue because that's meant to come off in the near future. So the poskim deal with these issues, but these are the kind of laws that come out from the laws of chatzitza. These are the ideas that come out. So a lot of food for thought. A fascinating sugya because I get these questions sometimes, so it definitely is on my mind. But not to worry, guys. Phyllis asked, what happened to Sukkah? How did we wind up over here? If you take a look in the margins, you can see all sorts of beautiful illustrations of different kinds of permutations of building a Sukkah. So rest assured, Phyllis and all of my friends, that we will be returning back to the sugyas related to a Sukkah proper. B'mheir v'yameinu. Amen.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Good
Wishing
Shabbos.
you all a good Shabbos.
Good
Take
Shabbos.
care.
Good Shabbos.